All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon at this point. Thanks for joining today to talk about the DNR Forest Practices application map. It's a really nifty tool. And I think it'll help you a lot, regardless of whether or not you're actually applying for or submitting a forest practices application. I think this has a lot of other uses. And we have Chris Boss today from the DNR, the Small Forest Landowner Office, to discuss that a little bit more. And like usual, but in case this is your first session with us, you are more than welcome to type away questions into the chat box throughout the entire session. Please select all panelists and attendees under the drop-down box next to 2 so we can all see what you're asking. Other than that, Chris, are you ready to introduce yourself and get started?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Patrick. Try turning on my video. Hopefully I have good enough service.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. My name is Chris Baus. I'm a Regulation Assistance Forester with the DNR Small Forest Landowner Office. Myself and Todd Olson are the Regulation Assistance Foresters covering the whole state. So if you do have questions about forest practices, anything ranging from stream typing to what kind of activities I can do, feel free to reach out to Todd and I. And today I will be talking to you about our DNR Forest Practices application mapping tool, which, like Patrick said, it's a really nifty tool to just kind of help get an idea of your property, even if you aren't planning on submitting a forest practices application. So I will stop sharing my video and start sharing my screen here.
Great.
And I will, in the chat box, I'm going to put a link to our Regulation Assistance Forester page so you have contact info for Todd and myself.
Good idea. And I'll go ahead and put a link in for the mapping tool if you don't mind too.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Patrick. All right, so can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep, it looks good. And Chris, I don't know how you want to do this, but some people wait to answer questions at the very end. Some people take them as they go. I'll leave that totally up to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think since maybe we don't have a ton of time today, I'm thinking maybe if you could write down your questions and maybe we can just talk about them all at the end, I think that would be great. And if we do run out of time, you'll have my contact information, so feel free to reach out to me after the session as well.
Great, sounds good.
All right, so I think Patrick is sharing the link to the Forest Practices application mapping tool, but I'll kind of show you how to navigate there as well. So this is on our DNR webpage, www.dnr.wa.gov. And you can find this by going to Forest Practices under the Programs and Services, and then over to GIS Forest Practices data will bring you to this page here. And if you go down here to the right, you'll see FPARS mapping tool, and that's our Forest Practices mapping tool. All right, and this is actually a really important pop-up, so don't ignore it. So a lot of folks have some issues getting the maps to load, and you'll want to just read through this real quick, make sure you're maximizing your viewing window. This also works best on internet browsers that are not Internet Explorer, so Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, those all work great. And then a few disclaimers on here. It's important to read through these. And once you do that, we'll click accept and you'll pop up on here a pretty basic map of the state broken up by counties. And I'm just going to kind of run through what all the buttons are real quick, and then we'll start going in how to use it a little bit more. If you are a GIS user, especially with Esri products, this is going to look really familiar. It's pretty intuitive, more of a point and click system than other programs like ArcMap. But so you'll see on here, this is just the base map that's loaded on here, and all of the layers available will show up here under data on the left-hand side. When you have these blue underline themes right here, that's a drop-down menu. And each of these boxes is a different layer or shapefile you can click that'll show up on your map. So if it's checked, it's on there right now. If it's unchecked, you can add it onto there. And a lot of these won't show up unless you zoom in, just because it would get way too cluttered. So just for an example, I'm going to zoom in somewhere random here in Pierce County. And to do that, I can either scroll with my mouse in or out like that, or you can click on the zoom in or zoom out buttons on here. And you can pan. So it works a lot like Google Maps. You can just left click on your mouse and drag, or you can click on the pan button here and then drag like that as well with your mouse. This is actually a pretty nifty tool right here. If say you're zooming in on Pierce County and you accidentally move somewhere else, this will bring you back to your previous extent. And you can click it as many times as you want and it'll just keep going back. So that's pretty helpful. If you click on the default extent, it'll bring you back to the whole map here. And this is a newer feature that's been added, but it's been really helpful, especially if you're somewhere remote and you need help finding exactly where your property is. You can click on Find My Location and you'll get a little pop-up menu. I've already gone through this, so it's not going to ask me, but it'll give you a little pop-up menu that says, are you willing to share your location with this website? You can click yes, and then you can zoom in right to your address where you're at right now. So pretty nifty. So anyway, I'm going to go back to a random place in Pierce County and zoom in enough so we start showing up some layers on here. And again, this is just the base map, the default base map that pops up on here. So everything that's checked is a layer that's rendering on your map right now. And you can click on different things to highlight it. So this is a fish stream right here, which you can pop over here to legend, and it'll show all of your active layers on here and what they're rendering and what those symbols are. So we can see this red line right here, we go into our legend, is a type F or fish stream. So if I want more information on this particular fish stream, I can just left click on it and you'll get this little pop-up window right here, and it'll show you everything that is in the space you just clicked. So we have public land survey townships. It'll give you the township section and range. So if you're trying to find your parcel number, or I'm sorry, your legal description for your parcel number, you can click on that and you can pull that up right there and include that in your application. It'll show you what watersheds you're in, survey line sections, and this is the one we were after here, water courses. So it gives you all kinds of information on here. So fish, it'll tell you the name of it, if it has a name, when it was entered, it's perennial, flowing year round. And yeah, all the information you could ever want about it is right there. So it's a pretty powerful tool to have. We'll go back to the data here. And so say I want to figure out exactly where my property is. This was actually added in pretty recently. You can now search by county tax parcels. So you can kind of see on there, you click that, and now the parcels pop up on there, which is very handy. All right, so let's take a look at some of our other maps on here. So if you click on the map themes, you have a bunch to choose from. Base is what we're looking at right now. That's your default map that'll just pop up. You have your activity map. This is the one that you'll actually want to use when you're going to submit a forest practices application and is a required part of it. You have a site class map, which is very useful for determining your site class, which is another thing you'll want to include in your forest practices application. A resource map that shows things like water, landslide hazard polygons, and you can get LiDAR through this, which we'll go through in a second. So really powerful tool. And finally, we have a water typing map. So let's just run through these real quick. We'll save the activity map for last, since that's kind of what we'll go into a little more depth for on how to make a good activity map if you're submitting a forest practices application. So we're on base right now. Let's take a peek at site class. And it does take a second to reload. And each one will give you kind of a unique warning or stuff you have to watch out for here. So Not a whole lot going on this map. These are all of the layers that pop up default, and that's pretty much what you need to determine the site class of your parcel. So I'm going to turn on those parcels right here. So let's say this one right here is your ownership, and you want to figure out what site class it is. And it pops up right there, so you know your site class 3. As you come over here, you can see that transitions to 2. If you have multiple on there, that's something you want to pay attention to. And yeah, site class is a pretty basic one, but pretty important for getting that information out. So let's pop over to water typing here for a second. All right, and this one has a little more information on here than just the base map. This one includes water bodies, wetlands, and streams. So zoom in a little bit right here. So you can see it has the same fish stream we were looking at a second ago, but now we have this blob that popped up here with a bunch of A's on it. And if you go over to the legend now, we have a new layer in here called wetlands, and it'll say type A, B, forested, or other wetlands. So this one's identifying as a type A wetland. And you can also click on that, and it'll pop up all of the layers you're currently looking at with that click. And we can just scroll through there until we hit the wetlands, and you'll see it pops up as a little highlighted blob there. And if there's more information about this particular wetland, it'll show up right here in this window. So just good to have if you do have wetlands or other water on your property and you want to find out some more information about that. All right, so let's go over to resource map. This one's probably my favorite map just because of how much information it provides. And it auto loads LiDAR in here, which was flown in 2019, I believe. So this is pretty recent. And you can see there's a lot going on right here. And I'll show you how you can adjust your layers to be able to see more of your parcel if you do run into this where you have the slope stability model is blocking a lot of the LiDAR underneath it. So it looks like we're near the Puyallup River on this random selection. But we'll pop into our active layers here for a second. So this is everything that's rendering right now from the data tab. And we can click on this to get a little more information on it of all the layers underneath this point. So all of the same township section ranges, those will show up on all of your maps. On this one, we also have 40-foot contours. It's a little hard to see zoomed out, but that's the yellow lines right there. And then we have the west side slope stability model, which is all of the greens and reds. And I'll show you a couple more things with this one real quick. So if we want some more information about what the slope stability model is, if you're not familiar with it, or any of these other layers on here, you can go to data and find west side slope stability. And there's a little drop down arrow right here. You can click on that, and description, if there is one, it'll show up there. If not, you can click on the drop down menu and go to view metadata. Oh, there's no metadata for this one either, apparently. Okay, I'll find another quick example of this. So you can go to description. Let's go for DNR roads. So this one has a description right there. It'll tell you what exactly this layer is showing and kind of how it's defining it. So good information there. This one has a little tab for view metadata if you want more info on that one. So it gives a summary, kind of exactly where that layer came from. And all of these shape files are available if you do have your own GIS software on your own computer. You can download these and bypass going through the application mapping tool. But if you don't have your own software, this is a great tool, and it auto loads all of these layers in here for you. All right, so that was one of the features, is getting more information through the drop downs here. And one of the other things you can do with the drop down is adjust the transparency. So the west side slope stability model is blocking a lot of the LiDAR underneath here, and say we want to see what kind of terrain we have underneath here. So you can go to transparency, and it's just got a little slider right here. So we can go to about 50%. You let go of that, and then it'll automatically adjust on there. So I'll turn that down a little bit more, exit out, and now you can see more of the terrain actually underneath that layer. So when you get these big layers like the slope stability model, that can be a really useful tool for you to be able to see actually what's under that big polygon there. And just to kind of show you how cool LiDAR is, I'm going to turn off the slope stability and the 40-foot contours to make it a little cleaner. And yeah, LiDAR is a really powerful tool. And if you haven't checked this out, I recommend taking a look at your parcel under the resource map with LiDAR. It strips off all of the trees and vegetation and shows you exactly what's under there for topography, which is really great for being able to kind of plan out your harvest and just seeing what you have on there. And another great tool in this resource layer are the two boxes here, the landslide polygons and the landslide lines, which is really good to know if you have them on your property and is a requirement to mark if you're actually going to submit a forest practices application. You have to call these out and mark them on the ground. So we'll click on landslide polygons. Looks like none showed up right here. See if we can find one. Okay, I guess we're not in an area that has landslide polygons. But anyway, so if you click on that, it'll show up as a little blob, kind of like the slope stability model, and you'll be able to tell exactly where that landslide polygon is on your map. All right, so finally, let's go to the activity map, which again, you go up to resources or go up to map types up here and then click on activity. And it'll kind of do the same thing where it'll take a second and then load. And if you were looking at, say, your property in LiDAR, it'll pop it out to the same extent you were looking at before instead of going back to the whole state, which is kind of nice. All right, so this is the activity map. This is what you'll be using if you're submitting a forest practices application. And it's kind of nice because it automatically pops in the layers that you're going to need to show on your map. So roads, water type breaks, the map registration ticks, public land survey sections, water courses, things like that. So it's kind of nice. It already does that for you. The ones it doesn't turn on are county tax parcels, which a lot of folks find really useful to use when you're actually trying to locate your parcel. So just for an example, I'm going to randomly select this one, again, somewhere in Pierce County. And let's say we want to do a harvest on this one, and we're trying to figure out how to make an activity map to submit with our forest practices application. So we can go through the other types of maps here to see what we actually have as far as site class, resources, water typing, things like that. And then we get to the activity map here when it comes time to actually submit it. So this is a huge help. It'll do a lot of the mapping for you, so you don't have to hand draw maps from scratch. I've seen some really beautiful hand-drawn maps. I, for one, struggle with stick figures, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. So this is a huge help as far as the map making process. So let's say we're going to harvest on this parcel right here and has a stream through it. It's marked on there already for us, nice and simple. We got township section range on here already. So we've got a lot of the requirements that we're going to need. And just going to pop over here real quick. So this is in the forest practices instructions. Everything that I'm going to be talking about is shown here in the activity map requirements section. This is the Western Washington one on page 24 it starts on. But it's also, this exact same info is in the Eastern Washington application instructions as well as the long-term application instructions. So it shows you everything on here that you need to include on your map, which is water, road activities, and your harvest activities are your big three. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into those. And then, yeah, it goes in a little bit more about what the standards are, what additional items must be shown in there. And it gives you an example, which we'll come back to here in a second. But going through the map, how to actually get to the point of being able to make one. So you find your parcel. Let's pretend this is the parcel we're going to harvest on. It's showing all of our information over here already. That's great. As far as just kind of planning out your harvest, you have different options to choose from for base maps. We do have imagery, topo maps, terrain with labels, and OpenStreet. You can use those for screening and printing out your own maps and making them. But as far as the activity map that you actually turn into DNR, we don't want imagery or anything like that, because even though it looks nice, it takes up a lot of space just trying to download it, and it can get a little cluttered and actually make the review harder, as opposed to just having a plain map like this. So if you're actually going to submit an activity map with a forest practices application, make sure it's just this nice plain map. And one more warning with the base maps, or if you're trying to make a map using LiDAR, if you actually try to make it to print it out, it's going to take a long time. If you have a really big extent, or if you have really rich layers like LiDAR or imagery, sometimes it can take upwards of an hour or more for the system to actually spit out a map for you. So just a little warning there. And so now that we have our pretend parcel here that we're interested in, I'll go through some of these tools up here of how to actually make the map. So you can click on info right here. If you have something selected, it'll give you that info on there. We have our legend already open. You can select features by line, circle, rectangles, polygons. Most folks probably won't use this. This will let you call out if you have a really big ownership and you're, say, trying to search for all of the streams on your property. You can use this to select an area, and then it'll pop out those attributes. And likewise, you can select by attributes via the table that we saw in the data here. This might take a minute to pop up. So this will actually show you all of the information for that specific attribute that we just looked at right there. So again, if most folks probably won't use this, but if you do have big ownerships and you're trying to, say, find all of the wetlands or all of the streams on your property, you can use these tools to sort by attribute and find them that way. And then this was the base map tab we were just looking at, where you can select imagery or topo maps or things like that. The search, you can search for your property by lat long, township range, or if you want to search by watersheds, you can use these two tabs here. Or what most folks use is, we also have this little quick search right at the top for township range and section. You can plug that in for your ownership and the map will automatically zoom to that extent. And then this is the tab here we'll use to actually print out an activity map. Come back to that in just a second. This will print out just the legend. If you have, like, say you want to print out the resource map just for your own use that had a lot of information on it, you can print out a legend totally separate just to make it a little cleaner. But again, this is one you won't want to actually include with your forest practices application. You'll just want the plain activity map. If you don't want to print a map, but you want to share it, you can click on this and it'll automatically generate a unique link where you can copy and paste it and send it to someone else via email. And then this is a pretty neat feature here. You click the wrench, you have a bunch of different measure tools on here. So you can, say, pick an area. You can go for miles, yards, feet, square feet, anything you want on there. Oh, there we go. So just pick an example here. I'm gonna click a point, just make a little shape there. And then that'll spit out the acres there, which this can be a pretty useful tool. Again, it's just an estimate, but it can be useful for kind of planning out your harvest activities. And we have a straight line one as well. So do miles, and then after the fact, you can also convert it to feet. So pretty nifty. All right, and we'll go to the print map. So say we got our section that we want to use. We can print, and it'll auto-generate the format of the map, which will spit out to looking something like this. So it'll include the map extent that you're showing, as well as this information at the bottom. So the standard, it'll kind of pop out what the standards are, and kind of autofill it. So it'll be 8.5 by 11 in portrait is what we use for the standard activity map. That's what you're going to want to turn in with your forest practices application. 1 to 12,000 is the standard scale that we use. For most folks, that's going to suit you just fine. And that's what your local DNR region offices will tend to expect. You can also go, if you have a really small ownership, I know I've talked to some of the DNR region offices. If you have like, say, 4 or 5 acres you're harvesting, they'll be okay if you go down to the smaller scale. But again, that's something you'll want to check with your local DNR region office if you do fall into that category. It'll pop up the map title as standard forest practices activity map. You can just leave that, or you can change it if you want to. And this is another important point to note down here. It'll automatically populate all of the legal descriptions that are showing up in the extent of your map. So you'll want to pick yours out only and delete the other ones, because that will show up on your map. And then just a little note up here, if you read through this, it'll solve about half of the problems you might have technical wise. So again, you don't want to use Internet Explorer, you want to use Edge, Chrome, Firefox. I've heard Safari works okay if you're a Mac user, but I haven't been able to verify it. And also make sure your pop-ups are blocked, because that'll help the map load correctly. So when you've got all that set, you can hit print, and it will take a few minutes, sometimes 1 to 10 minutes to actually load your map. So since we're a little pressed on time, we'll skip over here. So this is what it'll actually spit out, is your activity map. And it's mostly complete, but there'll be a few things you'll need to still draw in by hand, or if you're savvy with Adobe Pro, you can put them in digitally. But yeah, you'll just want to show, oh, there it goes. So this was the map we just made, printed out, and it'll show all the layers that we just had on there. And then you'll just need to add in the additional information that we're going through on this map. So the things that it won't show are things like your harvest boundary, any roads you're making, and any stream modifications you might be doing. So see, we're a little pressed on time here. So one of the biggest things you'll just want to remember while you're kind of doing this by hand is to make it clean, clear, and consistent. So only show the information that you need to per the activity map standards in the instructions. When there's a lot of extra clutter or notes folks write on the map, it can make it hard for reviewers to see. So if you do have extra information, it's great to include that in question 28 on your forest practices application itself. Down here in the additional information section, instead of putting that on your map, because it can make it a little cluttered. And then clear, you just kind of want to make it just a nice, clean, clear map. Make sure things are marked appropriately and very clearly on here. So our boundary is very clear and easy to see on here. There's not a lot of clutter, so it's easy for reviewers to pick that out. And finally, the other thing you want to keep an eye out for when you're doing your activity map is consistency. So say on your application, you have a bunch of wetlands on your property. And in your application, you'll want to designate those with a letter and number. So for example, you would say like W1, W2, W3. you'll want to make sure you label those the same on your activity map. So when you call out your wetland on here, you'll want to label that as W1, W2, and W3. That's a big hang up a lot of folks run into on this map when they're going through the review process. So clean, clear, and consistent maps are the key. And I think we might be about out of time here. So I will stop sharing and we can go to questions. And if we run out of time there, you can certainly give me a call and we can talk about this more after.
Great, thank you, Chris. Here, I'll put your information. Oops, that's not right. I was going to put your information back in there again. And it looks like you got a couple questions. Well, it looks like I got a question from Todd asking if you covered the using township and range as a way of locating the site, which I think you did.
Yeah, kind of. I think I went over that maybe a little quickly. Yeah, there's right at the top of the map there, there's a part where you can put in your township range and section to actually zoom right into your site there. So pretty nifty.
And Phil asks, where does it show you the scale on the map? And if I remember right, it's in the bottom left corner.
Yes.
Yeah, it is there. It's just kind of hard to see, probably with all the other information going on.
Yeah, and once you actually when you go into print your map and it spits it out as the PDF, it'll show up the little scale bar down at the bottom as well, and it's a little easier to see there.
Okay. And well, I don't think Chris has a problem with hanging out a little bit longer. I know it's 12:30 now. Well, there's one more question here before people hop off. Gary asks if Klickitat County is in eastern or western Washington for forest practices.
Klickitat, that's eastern. So everything east of the Cascade Mountains is East Washington, and everything west is we consider Western Washington.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I could see how Klickitat could be kind of a funky one.
Yeah, kind of right on the border there. So great question.
Yep. Yeah, if anybody has any other questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, Chris, that was awesome. I actually learned quite a bit. I did not know it was that versatile. I knew it was versatile, but so thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly. I know that was a lot of information all at once. So yeah, I definitely encourage folks to go back through the instructions. There's a lot of good info there, and the map requirements are outlined in there. But if you have questions about actually using the tool and the layers and getting some of those more complex things on there, definitely give me a call. I can help walk through those with you, or you can call your local DNR region office as well.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, goodbye, everybody. I will see y'all tomorrow to talk about iNaturalist and tracking forest health issues. Should be an interesting one. Thanks again, Chris, and I will talk to you later.